everybody, welcome back to our unit on financial statement analysis. I'm Professor Martin. In our video right now, we're going to be taking a look at ratio analysis, and we're going to learn the calculations behind the current and quick ratios. Not only how to calculate them, hopefully we also learn what they mean and how to interpret them once we do the calculation. So if you've been playing along, you've been following along with our videos, you know we've covered common sized analysis. And by now you should be able to do a horizontal and a vertical analysis on the balance sheet and the income statement and be able to interpret what all the numbers mean when you do that common sized analysis. Right now we're jumping over to ratio analysis, and we're going to start with the two liquidity ratios that I mentioned earlier, the current and the quick ratio. You may be wondering, well, what the heck is ratio analysis anyway? Real simple. Ratios are percentages that we obtain by dividing one account by another account on the financial statements. And it's important to note, we're not just randomly picking accounts out of the air and dividing one by another. And I don't know, there's a rhyme and reason to the accounts that we're dividing one by the other. And it goes back to the idea that there are relationships on the financial statements between different accounts. Some accounts are related to other accounts. And by dividing those accounts out, we can get some ratios that give us some pretty good information. So that's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be learning different calculations to help us conduct ratio analysis. Now, one other thing to note before we get too deep into the weeds here on ratio analysis. First of all, we make the calculations. It's really not just enough to calculate a ratio for 1 year. We don't really get a lot of good information for that. So a lot of times we want to make sure that we calculate ratios over a number of years. That way we can compare the current year to historical data. And we can see what the trend is. And so I'm going to show you the calculations. We may calculate 1 or 2 years, but just be aware that the more information you have, the more years or periods you can look at, the better information you're going to get when you do ratio analysis. The other item, we want to make sure that we're comparing to a competitor or the industry as a whole. And so calculating the current ratio for 1 year for one business, it doesn't tell us a whole lot. But we calculate it for numerous years, and then we look and see how our competitors are doing using the exact same ratio. Now we can really start to understand where we stand as a business. Anyway, it's really the point of ratio analysis, to kind of figure out where things are standing and maybe get an ability to predict where they're going based on the data. All right, so here we go. Liquidity ratios, our first group of ratios. When we talk about liquidity, you say, well, okay, well, what is liquidity? Liquidity is a measure of how quickly something can be converted into a dollar without any loss of value. And so we think about liquidity. I'm a big money player here with my $5 bill, my Lincoln right here. That is completely liquid. It's already a dollar. I don't have to convert it into a dollar. I can use it without any loss of value whatsoever. It's completely liquid. My beloved Joey Votto graded Gem Mint rookie card, on the other hand, it's not nearly as liquid. I would have to sell it and convert it into a dollar by selling it. And it maybe lose a little value because right now he's on the injured list and he's hurt and he's not playing. And so if I had to sell it right now, I wouldn't maybe get as much for it as if I would have sold it when he was really doing good earlier in the year, or maybe 3 or 4 years ago when he was really good. So there's a loss of value there. It's not liquid. I have to go through hoops to sell it, and then maybe I take a hit on the value. And so we have perfectly liquid and not quite as liquid. And in between, you have different assets that we'll talk about and different degrees of liquidity. So when we talk about liquidity ratios, we're talking about an ability for a company to pay off its short-term debt. And then you think about that, okay, the question that comes up, can the company pay their short-term debts or obligations as they come due? Are they liquid? Can they liquidate their current assets to be able to pay their current debts? All right, makes sense. That's what we're getting at here. We're looking at current assets and current liabilities and trying to get a handle for whether a company is liquid enough where they can meet all their coming obligations. Pretty important question. especially if you're going to invest in a company, or maybe you're going to lend a company money as a creditor. And you want to be paid back in the short term. You've got to make sure they have the ability to do that. So we got Walmart here, and you see their asset side of their balance sheet, and you can see right here they have total current assets. These are listed normally in order of liquidity. You may not have been aware of that. You may have seen a lot of balance sheets and never have realized there's actually a rhyme and reason behind why they are ordered in the way they are. Current assets are assets that we expect to basically use up within a year. Cash. Nothing is more liquid than cash. A dollar is already a dollar. It doesn't need to be converted to a dollar. So it's at the very beginning. Receivables, we hope to convert those into a dollar within maybe 30, 45 days. Inventories, notice they're third. It takes a little bit more effort to sell an inventory item. If I have to sell it right now, emergency, it's got to be sold, I'm probably going to have to lower the price. And so it's not quite as liquid as a receivable or cash and cash equivalents. And then you think about prepaid expenses being here. They're current asset, but they're not really liquid. If I've prepaid my rent, normally I can't really convert that back into a dollar unless I break my contract and cancel my rent obligation there. So you can see they're ordered in liquidity, total current assets, assets that we expect to be using up within a year. So our current ratio measures the ability of a company to pay its short-term liabilities out of its short-term assets. Current liabilities, current assets. And you want to jot down the calculation. It's a real simple calculation. Current assets divided by current liabilities. The hardest part of this particular calculation is finding the numbers on the balance sheet. The calculation itself is easy peasy. Current assets divided by current liabilities. So there is my other half of the balance sheet for Walmart, the liability side. You can see we have current liabilities. Current liabilities are liabilities that are due within a year. Short-term borrowings, accounts payable, accrued income taxes, and you notice it says long-term debt due within a year, lease obligations due within a year. All these items are going to have to be paid within 1 year. We would like to be able to pay those current liabilities out of our current assets. We expect to use those up within a year. Expect to have to pay those within a year. So, current ratio. Our current assets are going to be divided by current liabilities. So here we go. Let's go ahead and calculate it for Walmart. I'll put the numbers up there. If you want to get out your calculator and do a little math, I'll give you the opportunity to calculate the current ratio for Walmart for the year 2023 and 2022. Go ahead and do your math. Hopefully you came up with 0.82 for 2023 and 0.93 for 2022. All we did was divide current assets by current liabilities. Now, we got the data. We got the ratio calculated. What in the world does it mean? A current ratio of 1. Now, you remember Walmart's were a little bit less than 1, but a current ratio of 1 means the business has $1 of current assets for every $1 of current liabilities. For every $1 of current liabilities, they have $1 of current assets to cover it. That's probably a good place to be in. Walmart is a little bit lower than that. For every $1 of current debt, Walmart had 82 cents in assets to cover it, current assets to cover it in 2023. They had 93 cents to cover every $1 of current liabilities in 2022. So if we consider 1 to be kind of the baseline, we'd like to have at least $1 of current assets for every $1 of current liabilities. You can see Walmart's a little bit below that, and their condition is actually deteriorating a little bit because they've gone down from 0.93 to 0.82. So, is that the end of the world? Probably not. Again, we can't really make a whole lot of judgments off of just one calculation. We do see that it's going down a little bit. The ratio is going down, but we'd want to maybe calculate a few more years. We want to maybe compare it to Target. We may want to compare it to Costco, Amazon, maybe some other businesses in the industry and see exactly where Walmart stands. But for right now, Walmart is a pretty financially stable company. I don't think that's a huge issue. That's our current ratio. How about the quick ratio? It's ironic, they call it quick, but it actually takes longer to calculate than the current ratio. Quick ratio, another measure of liquidity that uses only the most liquid current assets. All right, only the most liquid. So what are the most liquid current assets? Cash, marketable securities, things like money market funds, certificates of deposit, different things like that, and accounts receivable. Things that are very easily converted to cash just like that. And then we're going to take those, add them together, and divide by current liabilities. Now, you may notice a key thing that has been left out of the quick ratio. Inventory. Inventory is not included in the quick ratio simply because inventory is not quickly converted into cash. It takes effort to sell it. It's not a quick asset. And so we pulled that out. You'll notice prepaid expenses aren't on there either, because those are generally not easily liquidated back into cash. So we're just talking about the quickest of assets: cash, marketable securities, and accounts receivable. Now, if we look back at Walmart here, and we take that in mind, we're talking about that quick ratio. If I'm pulling inventories out, my goodness, inventories were 3/4 or 2/3 of total current assets. And now I'm pulling those out for this calculation. And so if you're a retailer and you've got a lot of inventory, this quick ratio is a lot tougher judge of how your liquidity is because it's pulling out all that inventory. So let's go back. There's my calculation right there. We can see we got cash and cash equivalents. We got receivables. We're skipping inventory. We got total current liabilities. And there's our quick assets. We're going to divide those by current liabilities. So there's our data. We've got our quick assets added together for both years. We got our current liabilities. We're going to divide the total quick assets by the by current liabilities. And so go ahead, take a second, pause the video, do your math. If you've done that, hopefully you come up with 0.18 for 2023 and 0.26 for 2022. And so again, we've taken cash, marketable securities, and accounts receivable and divided them by current liabilities. A real simple calculation. How do we interpret that? Well, again, for every $1 in current liabilities, Walmart has 18 cents of quick assets in 2023 and 26 cents of quick assets in 2022. A little deterioration in their liquidity there from 2022 to 2023. And so that kind of sounds bad, but again, we can't really look at it in a bubble. We have to compare it to other companies in the industry and maybe compare it to historical trends as well at Walmart. So I'm not going to just freak out right now about the low current and quick ratios at Walmart. I think they'll be able to pay their short-term debts just fine. So in summary, the current ratio measures our ability to pay short-term current liabilities out of our short-term current assets. The quick ratio measures our ability to pay short-term current liabilities using only our most liquid current assets. You remember what they were? A little pop quiz here. Can you think of it? Cash, marketable securities, and accounts receivable. Interpreting them, a current ratio between 1 and 2 is considered standard. You'll see places that have higher than that, and you'll see some, especially in retail, that have lower than that. Quick ratios, a current ratio of around 1 is considered standard. But again, we have to look at every piece of the puzzle, not just focus on that one ratio. And we're going to learn all kinds of pieces of the puzzle as we go through the ratio analysis, and we'll learn how to put them all together. So in summary, we can't look at the current ratio and quick ratio in a bubble. Look at those historical trends at the company and the industry averages. We have 2 more sets of liquidity ratios that we're going to learn. We're going to learn about accounts receivable turnover. We're going to learn about inventory turnover. And we'll come back and do separate videos on both of those. That way we can break it into nice little chunks as we're going along. You want to make sure that you're writing out these calculations. That way you can keep them all in one place and you don't have to flip around back and forth through the notes looking for them. And so I would start right now. A nice little formula note sheet that you can refer back to. As always, if you do have any questions as you're trying to complete your homework, or maybe you have a question about what you read in the book, or maybe an item in my lecture video, feel free to reach out. We're always ready to tackle your questions. Until next time, take care, everybody.